afternoon. Welcome to College Unmazed. Oh, sorry, my phone. Welcome to College Unmazed, College Conversations. As you can tell, we do this live, so always stuff going on as I see Tim putting his stuff on Do Not Disturb, right? So
Yes.
welcome. Today we are talking about diving into cost of attendance versus net price, and how do we actually help families understand the true cost of college. I think it's a hard topic when we start talking about money. Some of us are a little stronger at maybe FAFSA and financial aid and sort of the cost of college, but I think it's definitely something, and I think Tim and Rich, you're going to agree with this as we talk through it. It's not talked about as in depth as we think it should be. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And again, being comfortable with it. So a lot of information today. Again, if you are joining us live and you have a question, feel free to put it into the chat. If you are watching via YouTube later or on our podcast, College Conversations, you can always send us an email at info@collegeunmazed.com, and we would love to answer whatever questions that you have. All right, gentlemen, let's get started today talking about the cost of college. We know who's here. Hopefully, we have Dr. Lapan. Rich, oh, sorry, I'm not in PowerPoint today. I'm on a PDF today. Dr. Rich Lapan, how are you today, Rich?
I'm doing good.
All right, and go ahead.
Oh, I'm just going to say, I'm only half kidding when I say you two are going to have to carry me today, because after having two daughters go through college, the emotional trauma of this topic might maybe a little too much for me. But I'm only half kidding.
Well, and your daughters went to private school and some more selective schools, right? And so you have some definitely a parent approach where Tim and I are joining that process here in the next year or two.
Yeah.
So we definitely want to hear your practitioner hat, but your parent hat too, right?
And my other daughter went to community college as well, so we kind of see
a little bit of everything.
But I do think it's one of those things where the topics that I wonder a lot of families feel uncomfortable talking about money issues in general, and then maybe it spills over a little bit to the college side.
Absolutely. So a lot of things to unpack there. And we have obviously Dr. Tim Poynton is on today. Say hi, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
All right.
Oh, hi. How are you? I do as I'm told. So.
That's why this business relationship works well. So let's talk about COA, cost of attendance, which a lot of people will abbreviate as COA. It's a lot easier to write, versus net price. And this is from, and we have this information in our book, and it comes from Sallie Mae. And I think, remind me, Tim, the name of it. It's like how Americans pay for college. Is that the report that's given out every year?
Yep, they do an annual report on it every year, and they usually sometimes add some additional questions. They just came out with it somewhat recently. I haven't seen the updated version for myself yet, but now that you say that and I see this, it's gonna be on my agenda.
Yeah, and we like to, obviously, as researchers and people in the counseling field, we like to sort of watch those trends as they go. Sort of how are people tapping into different sources of money? And so these statistics here that you see within the book come from that Sallie Mae report from last year. So 52% of families say they have a plan on how to pay for college. So Rich, what's the flip side of that?
Oh, that's an easy. This is the higher order math I can do. That means 48% don't. So this is an important thing just to take a minute to consider. The very first sentence in our money factor, I'm going to just read it quick. The money factor will help you manage the cost of college so that paying for college doesn't manage you. And this is a really very important thing for Tim and I to consider. So Tim and I did a study a couple of years back, and actually, and we were floored by the money issues that came out. And what we found was that we had 4 clusters of students, and there were 2 that just want to highlight real quick. First generation college going students and first generation college going students, it was worrisome because they were taking money from everywhere, high interest, private loans, right across the board. But almost half, and it's almost, our sample mirrors this exactly, because we had, I don't know, Tim, what did we have, 700 or 800 students? I can't remember, but they were all graduating 12th graders. And the thing is, half of them said they were within 3 weeks of 3 or 4 weeks of graduating, they had all been accepted to attend a 4-year college in the fall. Half of them said they didn't have a financial plan. Half of them. And this is what this data is saying nationally.
And that's really scary, right? You think about coming. And I think when you look at the biggest bubble, it says 91 families agree higher education is an investment in a student's future. So there's a huge disconnect, right? If there's a return on investment and it's something we should be doing, but then not having a plan for it.
Right. And if you look at, and I know Tim is always points out about retention and graduation rates, I think for first generation, for a lot of different student categories, as the financial burdens increase, that is one of those things to keep an eye out in terms of who doesn't graduate.
Mm-hmm. And I think that we say often the worst type of credits or college credits is when you don't finish and get a degree, right? So when you accumulate credits and accumulate debt, and you don't have a certificate or a degree to and you don't complete that degree.
Debt without degree is a bad deal.
Absolutely.
You have to get that degree.
And then here, just again, some of you listening to the podcast, so 48% say families use grants to pay for college. So that would be most of it based on financial aid, FAFSA, that type of thing, or even institutional grants. 58% used scholarships to help pay, which makes it the second largest source of funding. And then 29, this is what's shocking to me. I do a lot here in my community. I work with an organization called Future Makers Coalition, which is under the college access networks that are here throughout the United States, a great resource as practitioners to check out that if you have one locally. But we are really big on FAFSA completion. Like, how do we get people to complete the FAFSA? And over a quarter, almost 29% of students did not complete the FAFSA, potentially missing out on thousands of dollars. Here in Florida, this is an old statistic from a few years ago, but they said it was about $100 million that was left on the table every year in our state because people simply didn't complete the FAFSA. And I think now I've heard the statistics almost up to 200 million that's not being accessed. You want to add anything to that?
You managed to get it done. Sorry, Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just so that, I mean, we're talking to counselors now primarily, right? So if you don't know, FAFSA has a FAFSA completion toolkit where you can look up how many of your students have completed the FAFSA. Sometimes your state can help with that. The last time I checked, it wasn't necessarily available everywhere, but there is a way to do it so that you don't need to wonder who has done it and who hasn't. So, and I know probably most of the people listening, if you're here, you're probably aware of that, but just in case somebody's not aware of that there is that data available.
And there's been push in the counseling field to even provide counselors with real-time, up-to-date information about which of your students have completed the FAFSA and which haven't. Because there's also some data I've seen too. Those who get theirs in early, they also have advantages. So it really is probably the number one thing you want to make sure happens.
And I think what's really important as a practitioner, you might not know the ins and outs of FAFSA. I mean, I don't know the formula. I don't know, especially if you work with a lot of immigrant students or students that maybe have green cards or undocumented or just the whole process and divorce and separated. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it that make it very difficult, but partnering with your local community college or a local nonprofit organization like the College Access Network or MIFA or some of the other ones that might be state specific is so important because they have the tools and they have a lot of time training programs and are even willing to come out and do FAFSA nights and help your families as much as possible. So really FAFSA needs to be obviously important. So that's not our main topic. We're going to be talking more about financial aid and money all throughout this month, but just wanted to kind of cover some of those. So let's kind of dig into what cost of attendance versus net price really is. So I'm going to pass over to Tim. And can you walk us through a little bit of our fantastic little graphic here?
Yeah, so sure. So the cost of attendance is what I think we like to refer to as the sticker price. This is the published tuition and fees, if you will, for the college. So there's lots of private colleges out there that have sticker prices of $50, $60, sometimes even $70,000, right? But that doesn't include the gift aid, and the gift aid includes all the things that we have listed here: scholarships and grants from the institution, known as institutional gift aid. We've got federal grants like Pell grants that are included in the gift aid category. Any state gift aid, grants and scholarships that come from the state, athletic scholarships that are coming from the institution itself, and other gift aid from external sources. So yeah, the total cost of attendance, you subtract all of the gift aid, and then what you're left with is the net price. And certainly what we encourage you to do when you're trying to make decisions about the colleges in terms of their affordability is to focus on the net price more than the sticker price. So just a really quick story, if I may. Here in New England, we've had 2 colleges recently that have gained notoriety in some ways because they've drastically cut their tuition for next year. It's not this year, but the following year. Colby Sawyer College, which is in New Hampshire, and LaSalle College, which is right here in Massachusetts, have both cut their tuition. I think Colby Sawyer cut their sticker price by about 45%, and LaSalle cut their sticker price for tuition and room and board by about 1/3. They got a lot of notoriety and publicity for that. For essentially what they're doing is making their sticker price be more reflective of the net price at the college is what they've done. I applaud them for doing that. I'm not trying to make it sound like they've done anything wrong. I wish more colleges would do that, because the fact is that as you likely know, those of you that are listening to the podcast, there's lots of students and families who look at the sticker price and think that that's the net price. And you could be missing out on some really good college options if you don't know that at private colleges in particular, the sticker price and the net price are often very different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say almost regularly different, right? I mean, and Tim's got some more data he's going to talk about in a minute. But it's one of the things that sometimes really in the early part of of our leads process about building a list of colleges, and in some ways we're going to ask you not to really focus too much on the sticker price, because you don't really know what the net price is going to end up being. And some of the best financial deals can come from colleges that sound initially like, oh, there's no way in the world I'm ever going to be able to afford this. And in fact, those are maybe your very best options. And some of those places may have what's called a 100% commitment to need-based aid, and they'll do a needs analysis, and that's what they estimate you're going to be able to pay because of your need. That's what you'll pay, as opposed to other places they'll do a needs analysis, but then there's going to be a big gap between your need and what the actual bill turns out to be. So, and I think just to add too, I don't know, Tim, if you'd agree with this, and Amanda, but sometimes I think you're not really going to be able to tell this until you actually get the financial aid award letter itself. Because, for example, we've seen some where the work study money, it's added in as if every penny of your work study money that your son or daughter is going to make goes into paying off your tuition. So that never happened in my case. I don't know how it is out there, but it's amazing how all these added incidental expenses as well. So it's really becomes, that net price becomes something really to unpack and try to really understand.
And I think what's important, so when we wrote College Amazed, one of the big questions we had when I wrote my first book, I put like scholarships and sort of financial aid sort of at the end of the book, like after you apply and after you do everything. But what we really found is families needed that information early as freshman, sophomore year, even middle school would be fantastic, because we want those conversations. And so just like Rich said, you can't go into building a list without having a solid understanding about cost of attendance versus net price, and really looking at, what are your different options. And even when, we write our it's not our formula by any means, but when we talk about gift aid, we want to be very clear about what money you get that you don't have to pay back, and separating that from loans. And sometimes on award letters, they group that all together. And we're going to be talking about award letters on November 8th, more specifically and more in depth. But a lot of times you'll get a letter that gives you loans within, like, oh, look at your cost of attendance, or your net price is only this much. but you have $40,000 worth of loans over here. So, that's why you really have to pay attention. So we really focus on gift aid and ways to tap into institutions. Like Tim says, sometimes it's automatic. I think in our book we wrote, correct me if I'm wrong, Rich, but I think it's 89% of students or families don't pay the actual cost of attendance. I believe that's the statistic, right, that we have in the book.
Yeah, Tim, that's right up Tim's alley.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact number, but that sounds about right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or 86%, I'm sorry. So 86% of students, 9 of 10 approximately, pay a reduced amount. So only 14% actually pay the total cost of attendance or full price.
Can I say just quickly before you jump to the next slide? So with gift aid, and I'm getting way ahead of myself because in the book we have the last chapter is about developing a college success plan to deal with the financial, academic, and social challenges. And what's really important is to really and we have an actual example of a student who was offered 4 different sources of aid, but what she needed to do to keep those changed completely from one program to the next. And then actually one of the sources of aid she got embedded in the offer was in her junior year. I think she had to volunteer 10 hours of work a week on campus to do. So there was GPA differences that she had to. So it becomes really important to really know what you have to. So it's not just a 1-year offer, or is it a 1-year offer, and then you're going to be on your own after that.
Excellent. Yeah. And again, we're going to kind of dive more into that, but those are the things to ask, especially in the like what are some of the things that we have to do to keep this aid, right? And what are sort of the attachments. So this is one of the charts in our book, and we looked at the Education Data Initiative, and we looked at, these were averages, public 4-year in-state, public 4-year out-of-state, public 2-year in-state, and then we did 4-year, 2-year nonprofit in and out of state and for-profit. So private, sorry. So we were showing some kind of examples of cost of tuition and fees. So remember, tuition, that would be like credit hour, but then a lot of times colleges will tack on things like sometimes health, access to the healthcare system. There might be a fee for that. I know we have like an online learning fee that pays for like course creations. Sometimes parking gets attached to there. So fees can really add up at some schools. So definitely pay attention to tuition and fees. And then under additional expenses, then that could be like your room and board. And it could also be textbooks, transportation. And usually transportation is just, it's like averaged, right? They're kind of guesstimating what it might be doing. Hi, Megan, good to see you. And so looking at this, and then you can see cost of tuition and fees, then add up to additional expenses, and then that is the cost of attendance. Tim and Rich, do you want to point out anything specifically to show on this chart?
Well, I want to point out what Tim has taught me, that when you look at that column of cost of attendance numbers, you see the variability between colleges of the same type and different types of college. And I look at it now, there's such play in those numbers that, when you're looking at a cost of attendance, it really is what Tim's saying about looking at really needing to go dive deeper and get to the net price of things.
And you can see like a lot. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, no, just particularly at private colleges, the difference between the sticker price and the actual price, as we talked about a few weeks ago, showing some examples where there's plenty of private colleges where everybody gets a 40, 50, 60% discount, for example, like literally everybody. So it's disheartening in some ways, frankly. Because I'm looking here at the press release from LaSalle University. They cited research from Sallie Mae, actually, that says that 60% of high school students won't consider a college or university, even if it meets their academic, geographic, and social criteria, if the published price, or what we call the sticker price, is deemed beyond their means, right? Mm-hmm. More than half of the students, the majority of students, won't consider a college if the sticker price is too high. So that's just missed opportunities. LaSalle and Colby-Sawyer both kind of recognized this and did something about it by making their sticker prices and their cost of attendance be more reflective of the actual cost or the net price. So beating that drum again. Sorry, we can move on.
And I want to beat a different little bit of drum, being passionate about community colleges like you both are as well. I was speaking to a group of students for our Future Makers Coalition, and we were looking for solutions to help more students overcome barriers for degree and certificate completion. So we were asking the students, what are your barriers and how can we help you as the adults in the room? And one of the questions I asked every single group, I said, how much do you think college cost you? And I said, give me a number. How much do you think? And I mean, they're like 20,000, 60,000, 50,000, 40, ridiculous numbers. And I'm like, at our community college that I work for, our sticker price is $3,500 for like a full year. That's no financial aid. That's 30 credits, everything pretty much all in, like $3,500. And when I told them that, the kids were literally shocked that it is that affordable. And so we do talk about the $37,000 private schools, and we talk about the 60,000, Universities of Chicago's, and NYU, I think, is up to what, 85,000 now, right? And they might come down in price 100%. But I do think we need to change the conversation as practitioners and show them and really point out this as well, that even at public 2-year, 4-year institutions and private schools, because they give money as well, that college can be very, very affordable and done in many different ways, to maybe be a 2+2, a transfer. So just looking at public 2-year and seeing 3,372, that's pretty amazing, to be honest. And so just really make sure that we keep reiterating that, because I was shocked every single student were double, triple the price of what they just didn't know what college cost.
The whole issue about financial literacy too, for young people was such a critical, and Tim and I have found it in the work that we've done, that the college knowledge gap is a very real thing, particularly if you don't come from families where you have a lot of members who have gone to college, if you're first generation family. And we've got some data where that gap grows across the high school year. So I think it's really legitimate to identify key terms and concepts, and this business about the cost around that and bringing some sanity and much more accurate understanding of this. I don't think it can be underestimated, because if you're picking things about what's going to really predict success and stuff, I worry more about, like what's going to happen in your 3rd and 4th year as your debt mounts, and the challenges that poses to you and to your family. And if you, those become the things that really need to be addressed, and thinking about developing a good financial plan starting out is really well worth it. So I think it's really okay to repeat some of these key concepts and to get those into the kind of the background knowledge that young people carry around with them.
And doing it frequently and often, right? So starting early and really having these conversations. So one of the things that we really talk about, both in chapter 4, which is our money factor, where we really try to teach families having that conversation early, and then throughout leads, really focusing on what we call financial match, right? And what financial match as part of the 6 keys of a student's college fit. And so Tim, being our fantastic guru of all things Excel, has been able to, on our college data organizer, our CDO, which is completely downloadable, it's free to use, has kind of looked at some key things that are important and can be pulled up from iPads on the CDO. So Tim, do you want to kind of walk us through a little bit of some of the key things on the CDO? And I can make this a little bit bigger, so if anyone is watching live, they can hopefully see it.
Yeah, yep. So this is again kind of a screenshot of the college data organizer, freely downloadable from collegeamaze.com/downloads, as Amanda noted. And it gives you kind of a window into the average net price for the schools. Unfortunately, for the colleges that are selected here, none of them provided the net price by income level. So we don't have an example of that here, but if the college provides that data to IPEDS, which is the federal government essentially, if they report that data, we'll report it in the college data organizer and break it down by income so that you can see and better estimate what your actual net price might be, right? Because that's what that is a net price average and net price by income. The better way to estimate net price before you get an award letter is to use a net price calculator that's available on each college's website. You can also search for it. Just do Google search for net price calculators. You'll be brought to the Department of Education website where you can search for the college's net price calculators. That's better than using this as an estimate of net price. But in the early stages, if you're working with a student or family that's building an initial list of colleges and you're starting to explore them, this is a good way to get some insight into what the actual net price might be. But once you're starting to think about applying to the colleges, then I think it's worth the time and effort to go into the net price calculator for each college. Some of them, just to be forewarned a little bit, some of the net price calculators are a little bit more cumbersome than others to complete. Some ask you just a handful of questions, and others ask you lots of information. So just be prepared for some variability in that.
Do you find, Tim, about the net price calculators? I mean, how accurate do you find them to be? And are they?
So I don't have a way to answer that question. I just don't, because I haven't compared net price calculators to award letters, which would be the way that you do that. But the colleges are required to essentially update their formula to represent kind of the current formula they're using to determine merit-based and need-based aid. So again, the award letter is the final arbiter, and that's going to be obviously that's going to be your actual price. It's not an estimate; that's the actual cost. But the next best thing to that is the net price calculator.
Yeah. So you'd recommend people play around with the net price calculators?
Absolutely, yeah. I think I wouldn't do it for every college that you're just considering, but you can use a ballpark of the net price calculator here. But once you get it down to a reasonable list of colleges, 10 to 15 or so, then I think it's totally worth the effort to go through the net price calculator for each and every one of them before you submit an application to them.
Yeah, I would
get a better sense of what your financial budget is.
Yeah, and I found it to be very, very insightful, illuminating, and instructive. So yeah, completely agree.
And that's what, even when we were doing our case study in the book, and we reached out, so we did the net price calculator, and then we reached out to a few of the colleges to see if what we thought was sort of matching with what their net price calculator. And the one that we did get back from Truman State, and it's in the book, was very, very close and very similar. And they actually had a really great award letter. It really was informative. It talked about the grants versus the loans, and it really sort of outlined what was being given and how. And that's one thing I think with award letters, and we'll talk more about that on the 8th when that's our topic on November 8th, is there's no format for somebody's award letter. So it is important kind of going into the explore phase, especially of leads, that you do kind of have an understanding, okay, what is typical of aid being given? So like here, % of students receiving institutional aid, Mississippi State University, that's our example here, they're saying 90% of students get some type of aid. That's a pretty good indication that 9 out of 10, are going to get some type of aid. Where you start getting into 54%, 30%, it's going to be a little bit harder, but at least you're going into what does that look like? And then if I'm in state versus out of state, what might that sort of look like for me? And then, 90%, and they were one of the largest to give aid as well, according to their IPEDS information. So I think that using the CDO is so helpful because, again, it's just giving you more information. It's sending you to the net price. We use College Navigator quite often as well. But going in and doing that exploration is really important.
Yeah, I would say too, just adding to that, I could completely agree. And I think when you start using a tool like the CDO and start bringing data together and actually having conversations between
Yeah.
students and parents, I mean, this does financial. It doesn't have to be like jumping off a cliff. I mean, when I think
Yeah.
about the decisions that I ended up, my wife and I ended up making, I mean, I mean, there were so many things about prestige and esteem and all this stuff that went into it that I really needed to kind of pull off and I think separate out from. And I think a lot of students initially, it's like when we've done some experiments, Tim and I, about with money involved and what you're willing to give up and how much you're willing to pay. A high school senior will, I mean, $100,000 doesn't seem like it's that much to them, but I think that's why it's important to really engage the family in a real serious discussion about that, because obviously that becomes a very big deal.
Or I've actually heard of some people saying, as they're going through it, as a way for parents to relieve some of the stress around this, is they said, "Oh, don't worry about the price. Don't worry about the cost.
Mhm.
Now, focus on what's important to you and what you want out of a college." And where I've had this conversation is with graduate students who end up later regretting that, saying, "I wish my parents would have had me pay a little bit more attention to what the actual cost was, because it actually wasn't them paying for it all. It was me, and while it was well intentioned, trying to reduce some of the stress around that." And remove a factor, long term, it would have been helpful to have a better sense and a better handle on that.
One of the most effective strategies I've seen, actually, I saw a parent do a nice little Excel chart that, Tim, you would love, nothing fancy or anything, but they had the different colleges and then broke it down that this is how much you're going to pay per month for that loan after when when it's done. It's just considering it's a subsidized loan that you don't have to start paying until afterwards. But it's like, oh, every month I've got to pay 300, 400, 500, 600. And that's where people, I mean, that's where you hear a lot of young people saying, geez, we can't buy a house because we got this college loan, or I'd like to start a family, but we can't because we have this college loan. Those have become, the college debt has become a real impediment to people moving on with their lives.
And one of the reasons I think in our decide, in our D for the leads portion is we really don't let them bring in too much of the emotional decision until those award letters come in, until they have that conversation about their true net price for each of their colleges, where they got admitted and what their net price actually is. And then to reevaluate each college based on the 6 keys of college fit. And then you can, at that point, bring in a little bit more of that sort of emotional decision. But when kids bring in, and parents bring in that emotional decision so early on without going through this process, you could have, like, I'm in education, a teaching degree. Right now, nobody cares where you get the teaching certificate and degree from, right? It could be an elite private school or a 2 years college with a 4-year program. If you have a certificate, the certificate's the same, right? And so sometimes it doesn't pay to have a certain degree from a certain college. Sometimes it does. But that's where I think people get so enamored with a college or a location or whatever it may be, and they're paying for it for the rest of their lives, and they learn to regret that
Right.
later on. So it's why we kind of leave that later until the award letters come in.
Yeah. Well, no, and we don't have time to go into this, but that's exactly the point. I needed someone to talk me off that ledge, because I was like, oh, you mean because I'm a college professor, I don't make enough money for my kid to go to that school, even though she's earned her way in? Mm-hmm. So there's prestige and esteem issues that go in. It was a very difficult thing, but so it'd be really helpful to have some, like Tim is saying, some frank and honest discussions about that.
Absolutely. So hopefully, we have some tools like the CDO that can help you with that. The CDO, as we've said, it's a big document. There's a lot of information. So really looking at it key by key, using the charts tab, all those things can really help you, whether you're a parent or whether you're a counselor or a program director, to have some of those conversations early and frequently with your students. So we're way over time, but I think, as always, we love to talk about this stuff. And I'm really excited because coming up all month long, we're going to continue talking about different ways to pay for money. And truly, it's not going to be just the Amanda, Tim, and Rich show. And we are having guest speakers all this month, Tuesdays at 2, coming on. And our first one is next Tuesday at 2. Jonathan, I think it's Gowan. Am I correct on that? Gowan. And he's from the Northeast Board of Higher Education. Tim has met him a few times, but he's talking about tuition exchange programs, something that I really don't know much about. So I can't wait to sort of pick his brain and see about different ways that it's kind of like a consortium, or how you can sort of, one state can get discounts to go to another state and so forth. So Tim, is there anything you want to add about Jonathan's?
No, just that, I mean, he's the New England Board of Higher Education, and so we'll talk about it in the context of what that looks like in other parts of the country. In addition, he worked as an admissions counselor and has some ideas about financing in higher education and financial aid in higher education. So it'll be, I expect it'll be a little bit more wide-ranging than just on the tuition exchange, but that's going to be the focus of it.
Yeah. Awesome. And then after that, we have a gentleman named Mark coming from Tuition Fit, which really delves into award letters quite a bit and how to sort of understand those costs, the net price. And then we also have Julie from MIFA will be after that. So, and then that will be the end of our first season. So super excited. Thank you everybody for joining us today, and all of our online and live listeners. And I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you, Tim and Rich. We'll see you next week.
Have a good
Bye,
day.
everybody.